440 Max Wedge is a phrase that ignites imaginations, strong, raw, almost outlaw. But when you dig into Mopar archives, technical documents, and drag strip performance charts, it becomes clear there was never a factory-built 440 Max Wedge. The fusion of two of Chrysler's most iconic engine identities, a race-rigged Max Wedge and the street-smart 440, is pure enthusiast myth. Over this deep dive, we'll unspool the real story behind the Max Wedge program, map how the 440 evolved from the same family tree, dissect racing regulations that ended the race-legal street engine craze. The genesis of Mopar's performance. Legacy. The roots of Mopar's performance dominance lie in the bold engineering decisions of the early 1950s. Chrysler's engagement with racing and aircraft engines during World War II had given them unparalleled expertise in combustion chamber design. In 1942, their inverted V16 aircraft motor, the XIV-2220, tested hemispherical heads and high airflow capacities, concepts that would later define their high-performance passenger car engines. Post-war, this experimentation culminated in the 331 cubic-inch Hemi 8, introduced in 1951. This engine proved its worth by powering the Chrysler C300 to a then unheard-of 300 horsepower by 1955, a record-breaking feat for a production car. Despite its impressive performance, the hemispherical head design came with heavy manufacturing costs. By 1958, Chrysler transitioned to wedge-shaped combustion chambers, offering similar power characteristics with reduced complexity and cost. These wedge heads found a home in the new B block, a robust engine architecture that soon evolved into the raised block design. The deeper block allowed a longer 3.75-inch stroke, setting the stage for larger displacement engines like the 383, 413, and later 426. Between 1960 and 1965-1961, Chrysler's engineers began experimenting with radical intake designs, including long cross-ram intake manifolds with carburetors perched atop the engine. These setups harnessed tuning resonance to produce significant low-end torque, first for heavy sedans and eventually for full-on performance variants. The birth of the Max Wedge phenomenon, April 1962, marked Chrysler's introduction of the Maximum Performance Wedge, a deliberately engineered race-capable engine installed in intermediate B-body Plymouths and Dodges. Based on a 413 cubic-inch RB block fitted with aggressive components, cross-ram intake, forged internals, and forged pistons, the engine produced between 410 and 420 horsepower and nearly 500 pound-feet of torque. The Ramcharger's engineering team and Chrysler's Skunk Works programs tailored these engines for drag strip dominance, though they remained technically street legal. Early Max Wedges earned their stripes fast. In July 1962, a Plymouth Savoy dubbed Melrose Missile shattered drag strip expectations with an 11.93 second quarter mile at 118.57 miles per hour, the first factory-built intermediate car to dip under 12 seconds in stock trim. These performances signaled the birth of factory muscle. In early 1963, NHRA imposed a 427 cubic-inch ceiling for superstock racing. In response, Chrysler modestly increased the Max Wedge's bore from 4.19 to 4.25 inches, bringing displacement to 426 cubic inches. The updated engine preserved its ferocious torque and was available in versions producing either 415 or 425 horsepower, depending on compression and tuning. In mid-1963, Chrysler introduced what enthusiasts later dubbed Stage 2. Featuring more refined heads, camshafts, and intake manifolds and tested under NHRA guidelines, the engine retained its advertised 425 horsepower while producing mid-11-second stock quarter-mile times. A street-oriented lower compression version was also marketed for everyday use. By 1964, the Stage 3 version pushed the Max Wedge even further. With polished internals and slightly improved airflow, this final iteration maintained its 425 horsepower rating but was capable of low, 11 to high, 11-second passes at speeds exceeding 120 miles per hour. Though street legal, these cars were clearly designed for strip work. To facilitate this, Chrysler furnished options like heavy-duty torque converters, aluminum hoods, trunk-mounted batteries, and limited availability manual transmissions, Only 61 Dodges and 65 Plymouths were factory-fitted with the A833 4-speed for 1964. The late spring of 1964 was pivotal. While Max Wedges represented peak performance in the Wedge series, Chrysler engineers were already redefining high performance with a return to its Hemi roots. The venerable 426 Hemi, first introduced that same year, brought hemispherical heads and unmatched airflow optimization. Factory dynos rated it at a familiar 425 horsepower, but real-world numbers suggested optimized and boosted performance. Meanwhile, in 1965, NASCAR banned the Hemi, demanding broader production numbers. Chrysler quickly homologated a street version, reintroducing the Hemi for 1966. With the Hemi taking center stage, Chrysler officially ended the Max Wedge program after 1964. The decision was driven by shifting corporate priorities, evolving drag regulations, insurance rates for high-output cars, and the rise of emissions oversight, not by legislative prohibition. Where the Max Wedge and Hemi represented specialized performance assaults, either for drag strip or homologation, a more versatile new champion entered Mopar's lineup for 1966, the 440RB. The 440, the final displacement offering of the RB block, combined a 4.32-inch bore with a 3.75-inch stroke to achieve 439.7 cubic inches. The 440's advantage was its broad torque curve and daily drivable flexibility, especially in its Magnum and Super Commando trim levels that initially produced 365 to 375 horsepower and up to 390 horsepower in the famed six-pack triple-carb configuration introduced around 1969. Available in a vast range of Mopar vehicles from the Charger RT, CUDA, and GTX, to much larger sedans, trucks, and RVs, the 440 became Mopar's workhorse big block well into the 1970s. Unlike the Max Wedge, the 440 wasn't built for drag strip domination. It provided broad torque and reliable power while satisfying emissions and insurance realities of the era. Its longevity, through 1978 in passenger cars and beyond in service vehicles, demonstrates its widespread acceptance. Even under the tighter emission standards of the early 1970s and shift to lower compression, the 440 remained a popular choice, continuing to serve Mopar utility and performance roles until corporate downsizing ended its run. The myth emerges. In the annals of Mopar folklore, the phrase 440 Max Wedge sparks myths of a prohibited factory powerhouse. The truth, however, reveals a narrative shaped in garages and drag strips, not boardrooms or brochures. Chrysler never built, ordered, or sold a Max Wedge variant with 440 cubic inches. Mopar's factory Max Wedge program concluded at 426 cubic inch. What glued the myth together were enthusiast-built hybrids, gearheads swapping Max Wedge heads, intakes, and internals onto 440 blocks. These Frankenstein engines showcased astonishing airflow and power, leading many to label them 440 Max Wedge, though they remained unofficial builds, not factory-engineered assemblies. The term gained legitimacy over time, even seeping confusingly into aftermarket catalogs, magazine coverage, and enthusiast gatherings. Some restorers and builders proudly brandish their large block hybrids with Max Wedge decals, but again, these are enthusiast creations, not lineage-based Mopar products. Stories of a banned 440 Max Wedge often reference drag strip struggles, NHRA rules, or government crackdowns. Yet, no regulation specifically banned a 440 Max Wedge, because no such factory model existed. What Chrysler did in the 1960s was strategic. The rising fame of the 426 Hemi pushed the automaker to end the Max Wedge program. Insurance policies and street legal implications discouraged selling high-strung engines directly to consumers. Emissions legislation and racing bodies like NHRA and NASCAR introduced displacement and homologation constraints that essentially retired Max Wedge in favor of Hemi, but not because the engine was banned in itself. Meanwhile, the 440 slipped into production quietly, spared because of its street friendliness and compliance with regulation. It continued under changing emission doctrines and survived well past the 1970 auto industry shakedowns, retiring only under financial duress and emissions regulations in 1978. Today, the Mopar Max Wedge from 1962 to 1964 commands collector respect, even if it never reached Hemi pricing. Production totals for all Max Wedge engines hovered around 3,000 units, a rarity compared to Hemi's later volumes. Enthusiasts prize original Max Wedge vehicles for their raw drag strip engineering and unpretentious appeal. Simultaneously, the 440 engine remains a bedrock asset in the Mopar aftermarket. Priced accessibly and supported by extensive parts availability, the 440 is a favorite for restorations and performance upgrades. Mild rebuilds with stock heads yield 350 horsepower reliably, while mild porting can push the engine beyond 475 horsepower, proof of its enduring robustness. Modern Max Wedge heritage seekers often create hybrid builds, drag-ready 440 blocks topped with Max Wedge heads and intake manifolds. While they replicate the look and race car performance of a Max Wedge, they remain enthusiast trends rather than factory heritage. Why does the 440 Max Wedge myth endure? At its core lies the pursuit of maximum Mopar performance. The Max Wedge represents unfiltered, drag strip-tested power, while the 440 represents accessible muscle for many Mopar owners. Enthusiast-built hybrids fuse these narratives into a name that feels almost too legendary to ignore. Automotive media, less concerned with factory accuracy than engaging storytelling, repeated and reinforced the term. Magazines, forum posts, custom builds, YouTube videos all contributed to widespread belief in a mythical factory-spec 440 Max Wedge. Still, purists and historians maintain the lineage. 413 and 426 Max Wedges are factory, 440 hybrids are workshop magic. The true impact of Mopar's engine engineering. Far from being a footnote, the Max Wedge and 440RB engines together shaped Mopar's performance identity. The Max Wedge program proved that high-horsepower, drag-strip-capable engines could be factory-engineered and publicly sold, even if designed for race use. This innovation fueled the muscle car wars, forcing rivals to respond with innovations like Chevrolet's Z11 Impala, Ford's Thunderbolt, and Pontiac's GTO. The 440 reaffirmed Mopar's commitment to delivering VMAX large blocks across its product range. From muscle coupes to heavy-duty police cars and motorhomes, it was a staple engine. Its adaptability allowed hot rodders and restorers a reliable platform for performance builds that could be street-able or race-ready. Today, the Max Wedge's legacy lives in drag racing history, collector culture, and historical appreciation. The 440 lives on in countless street builds and continued salvage yard relevance. Separating Mopar myth from fact. The 440 Max Wedge makes for an arresting legend. It sounds like the ultimate Mopar power plant. It conjures images of outlaw street machines, and its name is steeped in muscle car bravado. However, a thorough fact check shows no official Mopar engine ever wore that badge. Chrysler's Max Wedge engines were confined to 413 and 426 RB blocks, produced exclusively during 1962 to 1964, and engineered for drag finals. The 440 RB emerged later in 1966 as Mopar's high-volume big block performer, powering a wide range of vehicles with regulated compliance and reliability. Builders and hobbyists merged the two with Max Wedge heads on 440 blocks, and enthusiasts embraced the result. But factory records, parts catalogs, and official specs confirm the 440 Max Wedge was never built in Detroit. Its story is one of passionate garage creativity, collective imagination, and the enduring power of Mopar engineering history. The shocking truth is that in Mopar, as with all legends, reality often trumps myth. Fact and fiction blend, but knowing the truth and acknowledging why the myth survives enriches the legacy even further.